I'm asking you to keep your faith and move forward.
Thank you, Jin.
I'll see you at Cedar Temple.
I'm asking you to keep your faith and move forward. That is what Jin tells his friend Norio at the end of the monk's quest line in Ghost of Tsushima. On first glance, it seems to be a hopeful thing, a friend supporting a friend through a hard time, a statement about not stopping to believe that everything will be better again. We have heard these lines 1,000 times in video games, saw them performed in film accompanied by swelling, hopeful music, or read them in the last few pages of a book. I'm asking you to keep your faith is synonymous for being faced with an insurmountable struggle, but simultaneously, it's also the confirmation that this struggle will be overcome. In Western media, especially in American media, faith almost exclusively means Christian faith. And in Christianity, the only thing worse than sinning is not believing at all. To not keep your faith. If the heroes of a story fail after hearing, I'm asking you to keep your faith, they surely failed as Christians as well as heroes. But why am I telling you this? Jin and Norio clearly aren't Christians. Ghost of Tsushima does something worse than subconsciously preach to you. It asks you as well as Norio to just forget what you've seen, to brush off this gentle giant of a character burning people alive. This whole scene is meant to show how much the war has changed Norio, and then it asks you to believe he will just change back again. If he keeps his faith, he'll overcome the struggle. Norio, too, the game is telling you between the lines, would fail as a Buddhist, as a person, if he'd let himself be broken by something as inconsequential as murder.
I'm asking you to keep your faith and move forward.
Thank you, Jin.
This sentence horrifies me. The performance, the music, the line, everything fits into the pre-cut mold of hopecore aesthetic, but it's the ultimate proof that Sucker Punch just sucks at writing complex characters. Ghost of Tsushima has a lot of side characters, and all of them come with their own little line of side quests. Although finding the plot and most of the writing rather boring, I quite liked Sucker Punch's approach to fleshing out the supporting cast. It's certainly about 100 times better than the treatment Fetch and Eugene got in the Infamous games. All of them have a somewhat distinct, if tropey, personality. The writing is rather weak though, because everyone having aligned goals, a shared enemy, and a similar backstory doesn't make for the most diverse storytelling. Sucker Punch produced something like 100 ways to hate on Mongols, but it never surpasses feeling like a list instead of a story. Let's fight these Mongols because they A. destroyed something, B. killed someone I love, C. I'm a patriot. I want to reiterate that I mostly talk about the side quests here. The main story gets a lot more interesting than that. Although I'm mostly making videos about characters from bigger story-based games and therefore often end up critiquing them, I'm not at all a purist when it comes to character design. I do believe archetypes and tropes exist for a reason, and using them is a great way to convey a lot of information in a short amount of time. Furthermore, not every game and genre is the same, and I probably won't ever criticize a platformer for having flat or tropey characters. Ghost of Tsushima has a more fleshed out narrative though. Not The Last of Us level of storytelling, but not Mario Kart either. Ghost is by far not historically accurate by any means, apart from maybe a romanticized, generalized aesthetic of feudal Japan and a very rough sketch of the historical context, but it does aim to be compared to Assassin's Creed rather than Horizon. And that's enough of a reason for me to say that Ghost of Tsushima wants to be taken seriously. In its story, its character design, and its emotional beats. Those are supposed to land, they don't want me to dismiss them. And that's why the emotional moment at the end of Norio's questline utterly fails. I'm asking you to keep your faith and move forward is such a disproportional ask, such a ridiculously underproportioned response to witnessing someone commit war crimes, that I can't take this seriously. I can't help but be, yet again, utterly disappointed at what I've been provided by Sucker Punch. To echo something I said recently in a different video about a Sucker Punch character, they tend to have really compelling ideas and then resolve them in the most outrageous way possible. Norio is one of those characters. He's a Buddhist warrior monk, a Sohei. In feudal Japan, Sohei were a temple's private army, which was usually deployed to fight turf wars with other temples. Temples weren't these romanticized peaceful places of worship back in the day, at least not exclusively. Think of them more as political players who hold land and resources and need to defend those. Feuds between temples, especially from opposing schools of Buddhism, weren't uncommon at the time. Ghost of Tsushima adapts more of a Shaolin monk aesthetic onto the Sohei. Norio is colored as a practitioner of a way of life where martial arts are a byproduct of keeping your body and soul aligned with Buddhist beliefs. This adaptation isn't entirely wrong either, because around 1000 AD that's pretty much what Sohei were. But around 1200 AD, when Ghost of Tsushima takes place, Sohei are better compared to mercenaries, a kind of standing army if you want. Instead of going with the historical timeline, Sucker Punch decided to model Norio after an ideal that's been dead for 300 years. So if you ever wondered why Norio feels like he doesn't really fit in, that's why. Norio was deliberately written to portray a gentle, devoted giant whose primary goal is to protect weaker and less fortunate people. According to his conviction, he doesn't believe in killing or hurting people. Despite being a warrior monk, he regularly expresses his distaste for violence. Throughout the main story and his side quests, Norio is subjected to a lot of trauma, both on a personal level and as a witness to other people's suffering. His temples get desecrated, his idols get destroyed, his brothers in faith get killed, and his brother in blood is tortured, maimed, and ultimately Norio is forced to kill him to end his suffering. As a consequence, he begins to unravel, becoming more and more violent. He starts to actively hunt the Mongols instead of just waiting for them to attack. Once he finds out who's responsible for his brother's death, Norio enlists Jin's help to confront and kill the Mongol leader. But Norio finishes the job without Jin. He captures the Mongol leader and burns him alive along with other Mongols. And that's when Jin says the infamous line.
I'm asking you to keep your faith and move forward.
For all the reasons I gave before, I find this statement horrifying. I don't think Norio is a bad person. I don't believe he's evil. I do believe that redemption is almost always possible. I made a video defending Abby because I believe that this woman is redeemable and shows as much on screen. Something a lot of you disagreed with, loudly and sometimes rudely. But for all of you calling her a psychopath for killing Joel the way she did and thinking of killing a pregnant woman, if you condemn her, you have to condemn him too. And him, by the way. But I feel like most of the people hating on Abby won't hate Jin or Norio the same way. And I, for my part, have to draw a line in the sand too. I don't think that there is a simple bouncing back from burning people alive. I'm asking you to keep your faith and move forward is an impossibility. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a reason for Jin to say it. I can see myself saying something similar if my best friend did something like that. I'd say it as a band-aid. I'd say it if I believe it'd keep them from killing themselves because of the guilt. But crucially, I try to help them through it, to talk it out, to get them away from all the violence, to help their mind and soul recover. I'd say it from a place of shock and overwhelm, because it's the only thing I'd be able to think of. And you'd see all of these emotions, the fear, the panic, the anxiety, written all over my face. But Jin isn't feeling anything particularly strong about this whole scene. He only seems to recognize it as unusual for his best friend. Like Norio was knitting instead of reading a book. Jin doesn't get to do anything. And I use doesn't get to do on purpose because I believe he as a character would eventually try and help Norio through it. But he doesn't get the chance because Sucker Punch decided that's where Norio's story ends. This is the last real conversation they share. Norio's story is complete, his character for all intents and purposes redeemed. He's not punished narratively in any way for his actions. He's not being held accountable, he's not being criticized or questioned. Norio's just moving on. He's such a fascinating character. I like his storyline and I even like this specific scene to some amount. I think it could be a wonderfully complex narrative arc if there were consequences to any of it. There are things you can't just bounce back from though, things your friends shouldn't be able to shrug off. And if Jin and the others would recognize what Norio did for what it is and act accordingly, this could have been such a memorable storyline. But as it stands, there is nothing to suggest that Norio ever deals with this trauma outside the confines of the story. And in media analysis, you can only judge what is really there, or at least hinted at. We simply don't know. Nothing about Norio's and Jin's last conversation suggests them meeting up for anonymous war crime committers later down the line. And I could ask the same thing I did in my video about Fetch. Is Sucker Punch lazy or stupid in regards to their character writing? But this time I think it's neither. Fetch would have been an easy fix even within the original story. For Norio, fixing his role wouldn't fix the underlying problem. We aren't supposed to feel any conflict about his actions, because if the enemy isn't human, we don't have to rectify Norio becoming a monster. For the whole game, Mongols are painted as these incredibly brutal, subhuman creatures that torture and kill and burn. They are delighted at the suffering of others, vile beasts who know no honor. Why would the audience care about a redemption for a crime that isn't one in the first place? After demonizing the enemy for 80 hours of gameplay, why would the player now stop and consider them people? Why would the intended target audience care about one Mongol leader and a few goons who hacked someone's arms and legs off? Didn't they get what they deserve? Within the world of Ghost of Tsushima, the player is made not to care about the Mongols. There isn't a sliver of evidence to suggest they are anything but monsters and barbarians. And this is in and of itself so wrong. I never thought this to be a question, but since I have received a comment asking whether Mongols are even real, I feel like I have to address that. Mongols are a real ethnic group that still exists today, and the way they're portrayed in Ghost of Tsushima is entirely problematic. What we know of the war between Mongols and the Japanese is almost exclusively based on Japanese sources. As we all know, history is written by the victors, and Japan hasn't really made themselves trustworthy in regards to historical accuracy in the past 100 years. I could make a whole other video talking about how absurd I find the notion to demonize an ethnic minority in a game from 2020, but this is a topic I'll keep for another day. So, within the world of Ghost of Tsushima, it isn't your job to care about the Mongols. It is your job to care about Norio, about his mental health. He killed a few Mongols. Sure, a bit more brutally than necessary, but Jin himself already did worse. And that's another thing. Jin already did worse. And Norio standing there suddenly guilty about doing something Jin would do as a recreational activity on a Tuesday. For all intents and purposes, this is nothing special. You see the scene, you forget it again, and you move on. There are some scenes coming you should care about a whole lot more. But I do care about this scene, because I and many others don't only consume media on a surface level. We see the cracks in the plot, we want the characters to hold up under scrutiny, and we want a certain degree of justification for the heroes we have to inhabit. And given this baseline need for resonance, Ghost of Tsushima, Jin and Norio just don't clear the line. They fall short of being justifiable enough outside their own story that I want to root for them. Almost every other character I come across in fiction manages that easily. Their worlds, no matter how fantastical, follow the same laws of morality as ours. You don't kill unless you have to. You kill as humanely as possible. You try to reason with your adversary. You don't burn people alive. And you don't just move on when your friends break one of those laws. You look at them differently and you question their moral integrity. I'm asking you to keep your faith and move forward. For Sucker Punch, that is a valid ending to this storyline. That's what I mean when I say they don't know how to write complex characters. Because Sucker Punch ends stories the moment they get interesting. Whenever there's a conflict that can't be resolved with a hug and some brotherly words, they resolve it regardless.
I'm asking you to keep your faith and move forward.
Thank you, Jin.
I'll see you at Cedar Temple.
I've lost my faith, frankly. I don't believe I'll ever play a Sucker Punch game and not be angry at all the missed opportunities and all the great characters that could have been but weren't. But I'll move forward, because maybe Ghost of Yotei will give me a hug and a few brotherly words and resolve this conflict. Until then, I am Bika, and now I'll get myself some sushi.